Hello and good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining for our Malaysia Digital Summit pre-show. My name is Callie, the conference producer at W.Media, and I'll also be your host for today's events. So today we'll be traveling virtually through Malaysia to explore all the nooks and crannies of the country's cloud and data center economies. I'll give a broader introduction of the agenda and speakers in a little bit, but I'm going to start today's events with a short interview. I'll be speaking, you touched briefly on cybersecurity, and we're going to dive into that more now. So Sina Manavi, you can take it away, cybersecurity, cyber risk assessment when pivoting to the cloud. Go for it.
I'm going to discuss about a number of the topics that we will cover for the cloud security. So Alan discussed about the cloud migration and from the enterprise standpoint, and I'm sure that everyone is so excited to migrate to the cloud, and there is no doubt that how much benefit we can have it about by having this cloud migration. I remember the time that I had a research on 2012, and I published a paper in IEEE conference that what was the challenges that cloud computing had, and during that time most of us, the focus was on the service providers at infrastructure level. But so on that time, many of the enterprise companies, they had the hesitation to migrate to cloud. But after technology transformation and improvement that we had all of this time, so we can see that a lot of companies these days heavily are investing to migrate to the cloud. So to some extent point, I can say that they have accepted the risk. To some extent point, the technology could mitigate the risk as well. So like I said, the cloud migration is a transformation journey that requires a lot of effort from the technology providers, from the C-suite management and stakeholders. So, and again, we were expecting to be more mature in 2025 for cloud computing and more migration to happen on that time. But thanks COVID that happened recently, and the pandemic that we had and pushed a lot of companies working from home, it's kind of expedite the whole process of this transformation. So now you can see that a lot of companies, they are already started using cloud before they were even planning. So among these cloud providers, there are a number of the key providers, and you can see that Amazon is there, Microsoft is there, Google Cloud is there. So there are different cloud providers, but there is always a question that which one is the best. So in fact, most of these key providers, to some extent, they are offering same kind of services. I mean, from the security standpoint. But again, it's going back to the customer again, that what they want to achieve and what they want to have. So we all know that cloud computing is a kind of a new cool thing, and all the companies, they're trying to say that we are migrating to the cloud. But the challenge is that, so we all of us, I can say that we already had lots of challenges in our on-premise on-premise environment that we had, with the support issues, the integration issues, administration, and all of the legacy apps that we had. But now imagine that by migration of these things to the cloud doesn't mean that we are going to kind of run away from those challenges and risks. So even in a on-premise environment, we know that we are not using, so we have lots of tools there, but we know that we are not using to the maximum capability of these tools as well. So we are inheriting the same risk to the or challenges to the new cloud environment as well. So migration to the cloud. So before we want to say that which cloud provider should we go to, whether we should go to Amazon, Microsoft, Google Cloud. So before that, we need to see that what kind of challenges are we going to face and whether we are ready for it. So I was having a discussion with a friend of mine 2 days ago about the same topic as well, that before you want to start migration, prepare your documentation. Governance is the one that's going to help you a lot during this migration journey. And we are not working in a waterfall technology anymore that we used to build everything, then said, okay, now how we should govern that. It's the agility mode. So if we don't have any agility and we don't move dynamically, we're not going to reach there. So to start that, first of all, we need to come up with a cloud security framework. So in that framework, so we define that what is the requirement that we have and how things should be run over there. And then we should talk about data protection. So in our data protection, we need to define that what kind of data are critical, what kind of data are not critical, and what kind of data we are comfortable to migrate it to the cloud, or we need to keep it in our on-premise. So this one requires a lot of discussion among the stakeholders, application owner, business owner, C-suite, and technology team. And then we need to define our audit framework as well, so we can make sure that once everything gone live, then we can monitor and check all of those gaps as well. A lot of incidents happen because of so even during the time that before you want to migrate to cloud, a lot of incidents happen because of the poor vendor and third-party risk management that we had. And a lot of vendors got compromised because their third party was vulnerable. So the next challenge that you're going to face during this cloud migration would be the asset inventory, because even on the premise, most of the time we're facing this challenge of we don't know how many IP assets do we have, we don't know how many servers do we have, and so the same way it goes for the number of the PIDs, number of the applications that we have, and we always say that if you don't know what you have in your house, how can you secure that? So the asset inventory, so you need to know that whether you have a proper asset inventory in place or not. Legacy application. So the legacy application, many of them, they require the on-premise technology, and you need to ask yourself whether you are ready or your legacy application ready for migration or even for a change. And the next thing is about skill gap. Many of the organizations, we know that we are running lack of the security experts. Imagine that it adds the security required skill set for the cloud technology as well. So then in that case, you need to make a decision with the current resources that you have, the skill gap that you have. Are you able to train them and then start the migration, or you need to engage a third party to do that for you? So by knowing all of those challenges, it's kind of, it's the elephant in the room that everyone wants to know that. So everyone wants to migrate, but there are a lot of challenges that need to overcome that. So that's where the CISO needs to start planning and strategize it hand to hand with the CIO, CTO, C-suites, and stakeholders and business owners. So while technology teams are going to work on their own area, or business team are going to define their area that they need to work on, the CISO should know that what is the risk that he is going to face from the technology aspect. So by identifying the risk area that he needs to tackle, he needs to define his controls to mitigate those risks. The 11 items that we are seeing in here was published in 2019 by Cloud Security Alliance in Black Hat 2019. That we can see that some of these key risks are kind of common with the on-premise technologies, but it adds some of it to the cloud as well. The next area that we need to consider is that, so while we are defining our controlled risk, so we need to also define our regulatory and compliance as well. So we should know that which countries we are having operation, and each countries what kind of regulatory requirement do they have, or if we have a business partner that we are working with, so we don't want to lose our business partner or clients just because we are not complying. So we need to understand all of those requirements and then see that based on these requirements, what is our gap and where we need to invest on that. So that's where the cloud migration strategy can be initiated from here, and our focus is mainly on the cloud security area. So once we could understand the business objective, once we could understand the regulatory requirements, and we could define the framework, that's where we need to, only then we can say that, okay, now I want this application to go on the cloud, this application stay in the on-premise. So based on that, the requirement can become more clear, and that's the place that you want to choose now based on all of these requirements that you have, which cloud service provider is the right choice for you. Now, finally, once you could manage to do all these migration, that's a place that monitoring and improving should take place. So now here's the question that how we should, what is the first steps to define our cloud governance and risk management framework? First of all, we need to know what is our business objective. Based on that, so we can define our main requirement, compliance requirement that as I have discussed. So once you have these two, then you can start the risk assessment to find the gap. So you can use a different kind of standard such as NIST, ISO, and then using the capability maturity model that we have, such as CMMI or other frameworks. So we can define that what is the journey, where we are, and based on that, where we want to reach out. So once we could define the roadmap, that this is the roadmap that we want, and based on phases that we want. So that's the place that we need to define roles and responsibility that each stakeholders in this migration, what they are responsible for. So based on that, so we need to kind of revise or even define the policy standard procedures that we have, and also how we should tackle the risk based on the identified risk. So whether we want to accept the risk, migrate the risk, or transfer the risk. So we need to define our policy. And again, Alan in the beginning mentioned that this migration is not only a technology migration, it's a cultural change as well. So that's where the IS awareness and training come to the picture. So we need to educate from the top to the level, educate all of the people about this migration, that a lot of things going to be changed. The company culture might also change as well. So, and the next step is that once we define all of those key areas, so we need to, like I said, we need to start monitoring and improving. So the KRI KPIs help us a lot to know that what is the risk that we have and how we should tackle that. And one of the advantages that cloud give us is the automation. So you should think about automation as much as possible. But again, you need to also consider that this automation requires a lot of integration as well, that bring a lot of challenges in the integration as well. So once we have defined the framework and our governance strategy, then we should come up with the key area that we want to address from the technology risk aspect. So in here, I have highlighted a number of the key controls that need to be in place. Obviously, inventory is a must. It's always is the biggest challenge that I can say that I have seen in most of the organizations that I have worked with. Roles and responsibilities. So I will discuss about the roles and responsibility in a few minutes, which bring that a lot of ambiguity with itself. And configuration. The roles and responsibility and configuration, we will discuss about it in the few slides. Then access management, data protection. Again, the data protection is the area that helps you to know that which data should go to the cloud, which data should stay, and then what kind of protection you require to be able to stay on-premise, or if you want to go to the cloud, even if it's a critical data or if it's a critical information, PII, what kind of mitigation control you need to have in place if you want to migrate to the cloud. So obviously, threat intelligence, as similar to the on-premise, will apply in the cloud as well, red teaming as well. And you need to also consider that when we are having this migration, a lot of users, they might be doing their own cloud tools or cloud services as well, which can kind of add the additional risk to it as well. So the reason I was talking about the roles and responsibility was, so you need to consider that different vendors, different CSPs, they have different roles and responsibility framework for themselves. So in here, for example, I'm explaining about Microsoft, that you can see that when we are on the on-premise, we have full responsibility, we as a customer. And the more we go to the left side, infrastructure, platform, and services, the responsibility increase for the CSP provider rather than the customer. So you can see that, for example, if we want to focus on the platform and infrastructure as a service, so most of the responsibility is on the cloud provider. So many of the risk and mitigation controls usually are provided by the provider, and then, sorry. Then when we are in the platform, so I can say it's a kind of a we can feel the shared responsibility more, because so we are having the security patches, upgrading the features, VM containers, OS patches. So all of this would be a shared responsibility. Again, it's not a single bullet that silver bullet that can work for everyone. So you need to talk with your vendor. What is the requirement that they have? What is the responsibility? You do have it. So by this migration, what you are going to gain. So like I said, yes, cloud migration is a cool thing. Being in a cloud is a good, it's a new cool thing, but a lot of things will change, some of it not. So architecture will definitely change, because in some extent point you need to re-architect that. In sometimes you need to come up with some improvement, but the principle and outcomes always are the same. So you need to have your periodic scanning, you need to have your patch deployment, VAs, threat intelligence. So these kind of controls are always in the same place, but just maybe a different procedure. Roles and responsibility will evolve in here as well. A lot of dependency and reliancy will be on the CSPs, and the controls and tools, there are some of it that you need to invest on that, some of it are already provided by the tools. So why I'm keep mentioning about rules and responsibility, so if you look at the recent incident that we had, let's focus from 2019 up to now, many of these vulnerabilities and many of these incidents that happened was mainly because of the poor configuration. So when I say poor configuration, I'm looking at it as a bigger concept, like it could be configuration issue, patch issue, poor configuration for the firewall, IDS, and other technologies that we have. So most of these incidents that we had happened just because of the poor configuration. And unfortunately, or fortunately, so based on Gartner prediction, by 2025, in 93% of the incident that we are going to have by that time, 93% of that is fully customer fault for that. So I know that we have a very limited time for that, try to tackle about this cloud risk that we are going to face by the migration and how we should govern that. So by knowing the roles and responsibility that you have, and setting up a proper cloud security governance that you may need, so it helps you to initiate your whole planning and strategize your migration in the future. Thanks for your time.
All right, thanks so much, Sina. Yeah, great.